If you had told me my life would change forever because of a crumpled lottery ticket and a squeaky front door, I would have laughed and gone back to counting pennies. But that's exactly how it happened. Not in a casino. Not in some big, dramatic jackpot reveal on national TV. Just me, standing in a cheap convenience store under buzzing fluorescent lights, holding a flimsy piece of paper that said I had just won more money than I'd ever seen in my life. And then, a few hours later, standing in my own doorway, realizing my marriage was already over. Most people get one turning point at a time. I got both stacked on top of each other. Winning and losing in the same day in the same breath. I used to think fate at least had the decency to schedule disasters and miracles separately. Turns out I was wrong. It started like any other tired Saturday. I was on my way home from another long week at a job that slowly drained the color out of my days. I wasn't miserable exactly, just flat, just stuck. The kind of stuck where every paycheck disappears into bills before you even touch it, and you start to measure time by how often the rent is due. I stopped at the small convenience store on the corner because we were out of milk. At least that's what I told myself. In reality, I think I just didn't want to go home yet. Home had become a quiet, polite tension. Nothing obviously wrong. Nothing dramatically broken. Just two people sharing a space and a last name, moving around each other like coworkers at the end of a long shift. On my way to the register, I passed the lottery stand. I had seen it 1,000 times. Usually I walked right past it, thinking the same thing everyone always says. Nobody actually wins that. But that day, my hand just reached out and grabbed a ticket. No plan, no logic. Just a small, stubborn voice in the back of my mind saying, "Why not?" I paid for the milk and the ticket. The cashier barely even looked up. It was such a small, forgettable moment, the kind you never remember later. Except this one, I took the ticket home, shoved it into my wallet, and forgot about it for a couple of days. Life went on like it always did. Work, dinner, dishes, sleep. My wife was there, physically present, emotionally distant. I felt it but didn't know what to do with it. Then came the day the numbers were drawn. I was sitting on the couch with the TV on more for noise than anything else when the local station started reading out winning lottery numbers. I almost switched the channel. Then I remembered the ticket in my wallet. I pulled it out, smoothed it on my knee, and glanced back and forth between the screen and the numbers on the paper. First number matched. I smiled at the coincidence. Second number matched. The smile stiffened. Third number matched and my heart stumbled. By the time I realized all the numbers lined up, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the ticket. $200,000. Not millions. Not some life where yachts and private jets make sense. But more than enough to flip my world upside down. Enough to pay off every debt. Enough to buy a better car. Enough to breathe for once. Enough to start over if I had to. I just sat there in stunned silence, staring at the ticket like it might disappear if I blinked too hard. $200,000. For a guy used to stretching every paycheck like cheap gum, it might as well have been 10 million. For about an hour, I let myself dream reckless and loud. No filter, no fear. I imagined the look on my wife's face when I told her. How she'd probably cover her mouth with her hands, eyes wide, half laughing, half crying. How we'd stay up late making plans, talking about paying off the house, finally taking that trip she used to talk about back when we still stayed up past midnight together. I pictured us sitting at the kitchen table, a bottle of something half-decent between us, planning a future that didn't feel like a slow grind toward nowhere. I imagined being the one to give us that, to give her that. I had always felt like I was just holding the line, paying the bills, keeping the lights on. Now, for the first time, I could actually give us more. Felt good. Felt right. Felt like maybe this was our second chance. I tucked the ticket carefully into an envelope and put it somewhere safe. Not a bank yet. Just a place where it wouldn't get bent or lost or accidentally thrown away. I wanted to tell her in person, face to face, without distractions. I grabbed my keys, still buzzing with adrenaline, hope, plans I couldn't wait to speak out loud. Then I drove home. I thought I was heading into the happiest conversation of my life. I had no idea I was walking into the moment everything would break. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something small and stupid that didn't register right away. Our neighbor's car parked just a little too close to our walkway. The neighbor was a nice enough guy on the surface. Friendly, chatty, always ready to wave or make small talk about the weather. He lived alone, always outside fixing something, mowing something, tinkering with something. He and my wife got along. They talked sometimes in the yard. I never thought much of it. Why would I? He was just the neighbor. I killed the engine and stepped out of the car, heart still riding the high of my win. I half expected the sky to look different. Didn't. Same cloudy gray. Same yard. Same front door. Everything looked normal. But the closer I got to the house, the more that normalcy felt staged. The curtains in the living room were drawn halfway, when she usually opened them fully during the day. The house was quiet, too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The thick, intentional kind. I slid my key into the lock, and that's when I heard it. At first, I couldn't place the sound. Just a muffled thump. A breath. Faint, stifled laugh. Not TV. Not music. Not the kind of sound you expect to hear in your own house in the middle of the afternoon. My hand froze on the door handle. People talk about instincts, gut feelings, inner alarms. I had always thought that was dramatized nonsense made for movies. But in that moment, my body understood something before my brain did. A cold wave passed through my chest. My first thought wasn't even suspicion. It was denial. I told myself I was imagining it, that there was some innocent explanation, that I was tired, jumpy from the lottery shock, that my heart was just hearing things it didn't need to. I pushed the door open. The house smelled like her perfume, heavier than usual. The hallway light was off even though she always turned it on when she was home. I stepped inside as quietly as I could. There are moments you can't unlive, steps you can't untake. Walking down that hallway was one of them. As I moved closer to the bedroom, the sounds became clearer. Not words, just tones. Breathing, movement, a rhythm that made every muscle in my body lock. I stopped in front of our bedroom door. It was half closed. From that small gap I could see enough. Her hair, his shoulder, sheets she had picked out for us. I didn't need more. I didn't want more. The realization didn't explode in my mind. It slid in with brutal simplicity. My wife was in our bed with the neighbor. At the exact moment I was about to walk in with a ticket that could have changed our life, she had already decided to change it in a different way. Time did something strange then. I'm not sure if it slowed down or sped up. It just stopped feeling normal. I stood there, not breathing, not blinking, feeling like I'd stepped outside my own body. Part of me wanted to burst into the room, shout, demand, accuse. Part of me wanted to turn around and erase the last 30 seconds from existence. But all I did was stand there. In that small sliver of a moment, something inside me cracked cleanly down the middle. On one side was the man who had pulled into the driveway, ready to share $200,000 with his wife. The man who still believed they were a team, even if they were a tired one. The man who thought this money might be the turning point. On the other side was the man who had just seen undeniable proof that he was not the only one his wife shared herself with. Only one of those men could walk out of that hallway alive. I backed away from the door. Quietly, carefully. I didn't slam it open. I didn't announce myself. I didn't let them know I was there. I turned around and walked out of my own house like a thief, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. My hands shook, not from rage, but from the sheer shock of having two extremes of reality collide inside the same afternoon. In my pocket, the envelope with the lottery ticket pressed against my fingers. That was the moment I understood something clearly. I had just won the money. I didn't have to lose that too. I drove without thinking. No destination, just motion. Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot behind a closed store and put the car in park. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. My chest felt tight, like my ribs were a size too small for my heart. I sat there with the envelope in my hand, staring at it. $200,000. An unplanned exit door. Parachute I didn't know I had been packing. I thought about going back home right then. Walking in, interrupting them, watching the shock on their faces when they realized I knew. I imagined the yelling and the excuses, the tears and the useless apologies. I imagined chaos. It would have been satisfying in a primal way. Explosive, loud, messy. But then what? A broken scene in a broken house with broken people. Me still legally tied to someone who had just shown me what I meant to her. Her scrambling to protect herself. Him scrambling to disappear. The ticket sat between my fingers like a quiet alternative. I realized I was standing at a crossroads most people never get. On one side was drama. On the other was strategy. If I confronted her now, she would know about the lottery later. She would know I had money. That money would exist inside the marriage. It would become part of what we'd have to divide. If I kept the win to myself for now and played this smart, I could walk out not just free of her, but financially able to actually start over. That thought felt cold at first. Then it felt right. Not vindictive. Not cruel. Fair. She had already decided what our marriage was worth to her. I was simply deciding what my future was worth to me. Sitting in that empty parking lot, I made a choice. I wasn't going to burst back into that house and perform my heartbreak for an audience that didn't deserve it. I wasn't going to give her the power to twist the story or cry her way into a softer landing. I was also not going to say a single word about the lottery. Not yet. The win had happened before the confrontation, before the separation, before the divorce that was now not a question of if, but when. That mattered. What I did with that ticket next would shape the rest of my life. So I drove to a bank. Not the one we used together, where her signature was on some of the paperwork. A different one across town, a place I had never set foot in before. I went in, chest tight but step steady, and got information. What I needed to do, how to claim the prize, how long it would take, how to structure it, how to protect it. They talked about taxes and identification and verification. It was all business, all sterile and procedural. Underneath their calm explanation, I felt my own sense of control slowly returning. This wasn't just about what they had done to me. This was about what I was going to do next. By the time I left the bank, the path ahead was clearer. I would claim the money. I would keep it quiet. I would contact a lawyer. I would leave my wife. Not because of the money, because of the betrayal. The money just meant I didn't have to crawl out of the wreckage empty-handed. It was late evening when I finally drove back home. The sunset had already bled into a dark blue sky. Lights were on in the house. From the outside, everything looked fine, normal, calm, deceptively intact. I parked, sat for a moment, and took a slow breath. I wasn't the same man who had pulled into this driveway earlier that day with a head full of plans and a heart full of naive optimism. This time, I walked toward the door with a different kind of awareness. I knew exactly what had happened in that bedroom. I knew what kind of woman waited inside. I knew the neighbor had probably slipped back to his own place, climbing out of my life the way he had climbed into it. Quietly, hoping not to be seen, I stepped inside. She was in the kitchen, moving around like nothing had shifted. Hair tied back, casual clothes, 3 plates drying on the rack as if the afternoon had been spent doing something as innocent as laundry and daytime TV. She turned when she heard me, and for a split second, something flashed in her eyes. Fear. Guilt. A flicker of panic quickly smoothed over. She asked how my day was. She moved closer. She tried to act like everything was normal. But there was no normal left. I looked at her and realized I was done giving her the benefit of a doubt she had no intention of honoring. I didn't confront her that night. Not yet. I let the silence grow instead. The kind of silence that says far more than yelling ever could. She felt it. She kept glancing at me, sensing the distance, not sure yet if I had seen anything, if I knew anything, if the ground under her feet had already started to crack. It had. And as she moved through the kitchen, faking casual conversation, I stood there with a strange, settled calm. Because for the first time since we got married, I wasn't afraid of losing her. I knew now that losing her might be the best thing that ever happened to me. I had $200,000 coming. I had the truth. I had a way out. She had no idea yet. But soon, very soon, she would. and my life, which had felt small and trapped for so long, was about to open up in ways neither of us had seen coming. Not because of the lottery, because of what I decided to do with it. And with her. I didn't sleep much that night. You'd think after a day like that my brain would shut down out of self-defense. But it didn't. It replayed everything on a loop. The winning numbers on the TV screen, the ticket in my hand, our bedroom door half open, the neighbor's car in the driveway. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My wife lay beside me, breathing evenly, her body turned away, like always. The same distance we'd had for months. Except now I knew what had been filling that distance. Under my pillow, the envelope with the lottery ticket felt like a secret heartbeat. $200,000. A number big enough to change my life. A number I refused to let be swallowed by someone who'd already decided I was optional. At some point in the middle of the night, something inside me settled. This wasn't a question anymore. It wasn't if. It was how. How I was going to end this marriage. How I was going to protect my future. How I was going to walk away without turning into the worst version of myself. By morning, I had a plan. Not a perfect one, not a detailed one, but a direction. And for the first time in a long time, I felt more focused than afraid. The next few days were a strange kind of theater. On the surface, our life looked almost normal. We still shared a bed. We still ate dinner at the same table. We still moved around each other in the kitchen, in the hallway, in the bathroom mirror. But beneath that routine, everything had shifted. I knew what she'd done. She didn't know I knew. And we both felt the tension of that invisible line between us. She watched me more carefully. Tiny glances, quick and sharp, as if she were trying to read something in my face. Some hint of what I'd seen or realized. I answered with an expression that probably scared her more than an angry outburst ever could. Calm. Calm meant one thing. Calm meant I was thinking. I didn't avoid her. I didn't start a fight. I didn't act colder on purpose. I just stopped pretending I was blindly invested in us. That forced enthusiasm I'd carried for months quietly dissolved. She could feel it. She started overcompensating in small ways. More questions about my day. Sudden interest in my work. Little gestures that had been absent for a long time found their way back in. Hand on my shoulder. A quick hug. A soft goodnight. If she had done those things a year earlier, they might have meant something. Now they felt like decorations on a house with a cracked foundation. I knew I couldn't stay in this limbo for long. If I dragged it out, I'd lose pieces of myself in the waiting. I needed to move. So I made 2 appointments, one with a lawyer, one at the lottery office. Both, in their own way, were about claiming what was mine. Walking into a lawyer's office for the first time feels a lot like walking into a hospital. You know something is wrong. You just hope whatever comes next doesn't hurt more than the condition you walked in with. The lawyer was professional, calm, and efficient. He'd seen this story 100 times with different names and different details. I told him I wanted a divorce. I didn't lead with the lottery ticket. I didn't lead with the affair. I just started with the truth that mattered. The marriage was over in every way that counts. When he asked why, I gave him enough. Not every detail. Not every sound from behind that door. Just enough for him to understand we weren't talking about we grew apart. We were talking about a line being crossed with another man. A neighbor, no less. He nodded the way people do when a puzzle suddenly makes sense. He walked me through the basics. Property. State laws. Marital assets. Separation dates. What the court considers fair. When the topic of finances came up, that was the moment my chest tightened. Technically, the ticket had been bought during the marriage. In a lot of places, that means it's a marital asset by default. I didn't ask him how to lie. I didn't ask him how to hide it. I just listened when he explained that the timeline, when I claimed it, how it was handled, what my legal separation date would be, could change how things played out. His advice was simple. Don't rush anything. Get your ducks in a row. Be honest in what matters. Be smart in how you act. When I left his office, I wasn't carrying instructions for revenge. I was carrying permission to choose myself for once. No judge could force me to stay. No signature could undo what she'd done. I walked back to my car with only one real question left. When was I going to tell her I was done? The lottery office felt surreal. Only a few days earlier, I was another anonymous guy buying cheap coffee and discount bread. Now I walked into a secure building holding paper that said my life had options again. They checked the ticket, verified everything with clinical precision. At no point did anyone ask whether my wife knew. To them, it was simple: a winning ticket, a winner, a process. They explained the payout, taxes, timing, a check, not a bag of cash. It would hit an account after processing. I thought carefully about where that money was going to land. A separate account. In my name. At a bank she'd never been part of. Not because I wanted to cheat her. Because I didn't trust her. That's not the same thing. As I signed the forms, something inside me relaxed. I wasn't at the finish line yet. Not even close. But I had taken control of the one thing life had handed me as a lifeline. $200,000 was no longer a fantasy in my pocket. It was something real. Something coming. Something I could build on. Walking out, I didn't feel rich. I felt prepared. Prepared to leave. Prepared to rebuild. Prepared to stop begging life for crumbs. I didn't plan a dramatic moment. It happened almost by itself. One evening, she was in the living room, scrolling her phone on the couch we'd chosen together at a discount warehouse years ago. The TV was on, filling the room with background noise. I stood in the doorway for a few seconds, watching her. There she was, the woman I had vowed to spend my life with. The woman who had been supposed to be my safe place, my home, my partner. And yet, she had opened the door to the neighbor before she ever opened her mouth to me about what she was missing. The words I'd been carrying finally found their way out. I told her I knew. I told her about walking in that day, about the sounds from behind the bedroom door, about the neighbor's car in the driveway. I told her I had seen enough. I told her this wasn't a guess or a suspicion or an overreaction. I knew. The color drained from her face. There's a specific expression people have when they realize the lie they were living in just collapsed. It's not just fear. It's exposure. Like someone ripped the roof off and let the sky in. She tried for a second to reach for old defenses. Confusion. Half-truths. Carefully edited versions of reality. But the look in my eyes must have told her everything she needed to know. She stopped pretending. She cried. She apologized. She said things about mistakes and confusion and loneliness. Some of it was probably true. None of it changed anything. I listened, not because I was considering staying, but because I needed to hear how far she would go to justify the one thing that had no justification. She blamed our routine, our distance, our lack of passion, life, stress, time, everything but the fact that she had a choice and she chose someone else. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I didn't demand details. I simply told her that her choices had consequences. I told her I wanted a divorce. The word landed between us like a dropped brick. She looked at me like she was searching for the old version of me. The one who would have done anything to fix it. The one who believed love could endure anything if you tried hard enough. But that man had walked away from our bedroom door and never come back. What stood there now was someone different. Someone who valued his own peace more than he feared being alone. I never mentioned the lottery. Not that night. Not the next. Not ever. She didn't know that the same week I walked down the hallway and saw her with him, I had also stood in a little store and bought a ticket that would become my exit fund. To her, the separation was just a divorce. To me, it was a complete reset. Could I have told her? Sure. Legally, morally, some people would argue she had a claim. That the right thing would have been to split it out of fairness or guilt or some lingering sense of loyalty. But fairness had been broken the moment she crossed that line with the neighbor. Guilt doesn't put food on your table when you're rebuilding your life. Loyalty to someone who wasn't loyal back is just self-harm dressed up as virtue. So I took that secret and held on to it. Not out of spite. Out of survival. My lawyer knew about the money. The state knew. The bank knew. My wife did not. By the time the check cleared and the money moved, we were already living like strangers in the same house. Emotionally separated, legally in the process. I slept better at night knowing there was something waiting for me on the other side of the paperwork. Cushion. A chance. A head start in a race I never wanted to run. The rest of the separation wasn't dramatic. No one stormed out with suitcases in the middle of the night. No screaming matches woke the neighbors. We didn't become one of those couples you hear through thin apartment walls. We became something worse in some ways. Two people quietly dismantling a shared life. We divided furniture. We sorted through drawers. We decided who would keep what. She took more of the sentimental things. Photos, souvenirs, the mug her grandmother had given her, the old blanket from her childhood, pieces of history I had never really had a claim to in the first place. I kept what was practical. Tools, kitchen equipment, the car that didn't constantly need repairs. It was almost businesslike. Two people wrapping up a contract that had run its course. Sometimes she'd look at me like she wanted to say something. Question, maybe. A plea. An apology. A why didn't we fix this earlier? But whatever words she had stayed locked behind her teeth. My answer, even if she never heard it, was simple. You talked to the wrong person first. You could have come to me when you were lonely. You could have come to me when you were unhappy. You went to the neighbor instead. By the time you came back, there was nothing left for me to catch. The day she left for good was quiet. It always surprised me how silent big endings can be. No rain. No dramatic storm. Just soft daylight and a cool breeze. She loaded her boxes into the car. Clothes, bags, pieces of a life that used to feel intertwined with my own. We didn't hug. We didn't say, let's keep in touch. We didn't promise to be friends. We stood facing each other in the driveway for a long second that felt like a full chapter. There was sadness. There was regret. There was no going back. She got in the car, closed the door, started the engine, and then she was gone. No one cheered. No one cried on the lawn. The house didn't suddenly feel brighter or heavier. It just felt mine again. For the first time in years, I walked back inside and didn't feel like a guest. The silence wasn't hostile anymore. It was open. I went upstairs, stood in the doorway of the bedroom she'd shared with someone else behind my back, and exhaled. Still hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. But underneath the hurt was something else. Relief. She was no longer my problem to fix. No longer my responsibility to emotionally carry. No longer standing between me and the life I could build. Downstairs, in a folder tucked neatly into a desk drawer, was confirmation that I wasn't starting from zero. $200,000 sat in an account with my name on it. Not enough to never work again. More than enough to never be trapped again. I didn't immediately quit my job and run off to some island. That's not how real life works. I did something a lot less glamorous and a lot more important. I started planning. I paid off the debts that had been clinging to me for years. I fixed the car instead of patching it up with cheap repairs. I put a serious chunk into savings, a real emergency fund for the first time in my life. Then I did something that felt almost rebellious. I invested in myself. Not in some get-rich-quick scheme. Not in flashy toys. In simple things that made my everyday life better. Better furniture. Health checkups I had been postponing. A small home office where I could actually think and not feel like I was squeezed into the corner of someone else's space. I didn't tell anyone how I had the money. I let people assume whatever they wanted. A raise, a bonus, a family inheritance. The details didn't matter. What mattered was how different my days began to feel. No tension when I turned the key in the front door. No hesitation before walking into my own bedroom. No quiet resentment curling around the edges of every conversation. Just peace. For a long time, I thought happiness meant having the right person next to you. Now I was starting to understand something else. Sometimes happiness is simply the absence of the wrong person. It would take time for that lesson to fully land. Time and one conversation I didn't know I still needed. Because as good as life was starting to feel, there was one more moment coming down the road. One more scene that would close this story for good. A chance encounter I didn't plan, in a place as ordinary as that first convenience store. That would be the day I realized just how lucky I really was, not because of the lottery, but because of what I hadn't held on to. And that final realization would come later, in a quiet, unexpected way. The last time I saw her. The last time I saw him. The last time I felt anything but gratitude for the way it all turned out. But that's another part of the story. Months passed. Not in a blur, not in a rush. Just in a steady, gentle way that life moves when it stops fighting you. Every week felt a little lighter than the last. Every morning felt a bit freer. Peace has a quiet sound to it, almost like a room with good acoustics, where nothing echoes painfully anymore. I worked, saved money, fixed the house, rebuilt myself in small, meaningful steps. No dramatic reinventions. No sudden transformations. Just a slow return to a version of me I hadn't seen in years. The version of me who wasn't tired all the time. Who didn't flinch at silence. Who didn't walk on emotional eggshells in his own home. I learned to enjoy my own company again. To eat dinner without feeling watched. To sleep without wondering what was happening behind my back. I didn't think about her much. Not out of denial, just because the weight wasn't there anymore. But fate, with its strange timing, always gives you one last look at the life you left behind. Mine came one afternoon at a strip mall, the kind of place where half the stores are empty and the other half smell like supermarket air freshener. I had just walked out of a hardware store with a box of new tools. Ones I could actually afford now. When I heard someone call my name, it wasn't her voice or his. It was someone from the neighborhood. A guy who knew both of us well enough to stop and say hello. He looked at me with genuine surprise, the kind people have when they see someone who has noticeably changed. He said I looked good, better, healthier, happier. I thanked him. We chatted for a minute. Nothing deep, nothing dramatic. Then he nodded toward a bench near the coffee shop. Sitting there, as if the universe had placed them like props in a play, were my ex-wife and the neighbor. My stomach didn't drop. My pulse didn't jump. I felt nothing sharp. Just a calm, distant awareness, like looking at old photographs of people you used to know. I walked closer, not to approach them but because the path to my car passed right by. If life wanted me to see them, then fine, I'd look. And what I saw didn't hurt. Clarified. They didn't look like two people who had escaped into a great romance. They looked like people who had run from one cage only to land in another. She looked tired. Older somehow, though not in years. Her hair was unstyled, pulled back in a way that tried to hide how much she'd stopped caring. Her shoulders slumped inward. She held a cheap plastic cup of iced coffee with both hands, like she needed it for warmth even on a warm day. The neighbor, the man she once chose over our marriage, stared at the ground, foot tapping anxiously. Not confident, not cheerful, not even guilty, just worn out like someone carrying responsibility he wasn't built for. There was no laughter between them, no closeness, no chemistry, just the weary silence of two people who discovered that leaving wasn't the same as starting over. She looked up then, her eyes scanning the area, and saw me. Her breath caught. I saw the recognition hit her like a small collapse behind her face. Not shock, not anger, not longing. Regret. Deep, quiet regret. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that just sinks. For a second, neither of us moved. Her eyes dropped to the ground. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear the same way she always did when she was nervous. I remembered that gesture, but the memory didn't sting anymore. Felt like a page from a book I once read. He looked up too, briefly, and the moment he realized who I was, his posture changed. He straightened as if preparing for something. A confrontation that wasn't coming. I wasn't there to reclaim anything. There was nothing left to reclaim. I gave them both a small nod, polite, distant, detached. The kind you give strangers out of courtesy, not connection. Then I kept walking. No stopping. No words. No guilt. No pain. Just forward. As I reached my car, I felt something unexpected wash over me. Not triumph. Not vindication. Peace. Real grounded peace. Because in that moment, it became undeniably clear. She hadn't left me for something better. She had left me for something easier. And life had taught her the difference. He hadn't won. There was nothing to win. We were three people standing in the aftermath of choices, and I was the only one who looked like I'd made it out intact. When I sat in my car, I took a slow breath and let the years of weight I didn't even realize I still carried fall off my chest. The lottery had changed my circumstances. Her betrayal had changed my direction. But I had changed my life. Not by escaping, by rebuilding, by choosing a future instead of reliving a past. As I drove away, I didn't look back. And not because I wanted to seem strong, but because there was simply nothing behind me worth turning toward. Whatever story they were living now wasn't my story. Whatever consequences they faced weren't my burden. Whatever regrets she held weren't mine to fix. My life was better without her. Better than she imagined. Better than I ever imagined, honestly. Money didn't heal me. It just gave me room to heal. But leaving her, that gave me everything else. And in the quiet that filled my car as I pulled out of the parking lot, I realized something I never expected. I wasn't the loser in this story. I was the lucky one. Lucky to walk away. Lucky to start over. Lucky to have a future untouched by people who broke themselves trying to break me. And that was the biggest win of all.